St. Louis.
And good to be with you as well, sir. I hate to start off with bad news. I'm just curious as to your take. This horrible collision with the USS Fitzgerald coming in contact with a Philippine container ship off the coast of Japan. They have found the bodies of the U.S. Sailors who were in their crew compartments. Unfortunately, they died. But my dad served on a destroyer. He was a ship's physician. And he said, you know, they're pretty nimble ships and vessels, whereas these container ships are not. How could this possibly have happened in your expertise?
Yeah, let's think of this as a 16-lane highway with cars and trucks heading toward each other, but they're in separate lanes, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is open seaway, Doug, and so these ships are moving at speed, but it's the middle of the night. There's no defined lanes, and my guess is that cargo ship, that container ship, made some kind of bizarre maneuver, twisted around. Who knows? We'll find out in the investigation. But as nimble as a Navy destroyer is, they couldn't quite get out of the way. Tragic. Now, the good news is this is very rare. I mean, once every decade or two, an accident like this. And lastly, I'll say kudos to the crew of that ship who performed heroically. That thing, by all rights, should have sunk.
Yeah.
And the crew saved it. So God bless them all.
Let's talk about your book, Sea Power, and I think you bring up a very, very good point that we have been a maritime nation for many numbers of years, and your feeling is that we need to continue to do that, not only to show the flag, as it were, but also because of the global economy that we face now.
Exactly right. Let's face it, 95% of the world's goods move on the oceans of the world. For years, since the end of the Cold War, we've had no significant challengers out there. But now we see Russia building a big new fleet. They're going to add 100 ships over the next 3 years. We see China's fleet rising. They now have aircraft carriers. Those oceans suddenly look a lot smaller, and they look more contested. Sea power will continue to matter for us so we can keep those sea lanes open and project U.S. power where we need to.
What are the vessels that the United States Navy is online now and looking forward to putting to sea to help us do just that?
Well, at the top of the list would be our nuclear aircraft carriers. We've got Gerald R. Ford, named after President Ford, just coming online. There are 2 more behind that. So we've got a reasonable program of construction, but unfortunately during the Obama years we didn't build enough for the future. We're hoping to see the Trump administration correct that. We've only got 275 ships in our Navy today. Under President Reagan we had 600. We need to build that up to at least 350 if we're going to maintain American sea power.
What's the cost of that going to be? Just guessing.
It'll be fairly significant, but it won't be as much as you might think. So let's say $10 to $15 billion per year. But let's recall the defense budget, which is, I think, reasonable, is $600 billion. So this isn't an enormous lift. We can do this. We have the shipyards, the technology, the mariners to man them. This is within our national capability, and it's a high priority.
One of the things that I did want to touch bases with you, and you've already basically brought it up, is China. China seems to be building islands in the middle of nowhere and basically extending their claims of property rights. How much is that going to be a major issue for the United States in the years to come?
It's a huge issue because what they're doing is claiming the entire South China Sea, which would be roughly like the United States simply claiming the Gulf of Mexico. What's significant about China doing that over an enormous water space is they get then to control those waterways. 80% of all Asian trade flows through the South China Sea, and there are billions of barrels of oil and trillions of cubic feet of natural gas under the South China Sea. All that would fall into China's lap. They're going to build those artificial islands to try and claim it. We have to push back on that. We need to do that with our allies, partners, and friends in the region, Japan, South Korea, Australia. If we don't do that, China will dominate Asia. We can't let that happen.
You've written this book, Sea Power, The History and Geopolitics of the World's Oceans. You're a retired 4-star admiral, 35 years of active service. Every once in a while in the morning when you wake up, you think, it would be nice to be on the bridge again?
Oh, indeed it would. And all of us, and I spent 11 years, day for day, if you add up all my days at sea, 11 years on the deep ocean, out of sight of land. And sure, I miss it. When I was the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, I got to sail a desk, and that was my last job on active duty. Part of me wishes I was just a young destroyer captain again out there on one of these destroyers.
And how many destroyers did you serve on?
Over the course of my career, destroyers and cruisers, roughly the same. I served on half a dozen. I commanded aircraft carrier Enterprise, the strike group associated with it. So plenty of sea time out there. And what I learned from it and tried to pour into this book, Sea Power, is the importance of the oceans to our nation across the board, geopolitically, militarily, economically, even the environment matters.
Very good. Admiral, thank you for the time this morning. We appreciate it.
All the best. Thank you very much, Doug.
Admiral James Stavridis, Sea Power, the history and geopolitics of the world's oceans, joining us this morning here on the Big 5.